It's no surprise that physical media is becoming lost to time, but I absolutely love the box cover art on old video games. I mean, just look at this game called Adventure for the Atari 2600. It's a console from 1977. It's got this great hand-drawn art style and looks pretty interesting, but the best part is, you boot it up only to find this gameplay. Now, obviously, I'm not gonna rag on a game's graphics from 1980, but it got me thinking, what if we did the opposite and took the box art from 3 modern video games and give them a new, or I guess old, coat of paint? Let's give it a go, starting with Valve's cult classic puzzle game takes the cake for being our first candidate up for retrofying. Yep, just made up a new word. And speaking of cake, what do you think about making the fabled treat front and center on our replica Atari 2600 box? And the cake just can't be floating, we'll need a surface to go under it. So I'm thinking one of the cubes would be a good option for that. And for the background, one of the white portal-friendly surfaces from the game will do nicely, so we can get a portal somewhere in here. We can't have just the cake on the cover. This isn't a baking game. I'll use the orange portal so we'll get a nice contrast against the box's blue background. And to just add some detail to the background, I like to add the Ratman graffiti to the wall. But let's hide the cake as a lie behind the portal to add to the mystery. This portal has to lead somewhere, so what if we make it so the cake is stuck in the infinite portal loop, sort of like what's going on in the clip you're seeing here. So inside of that portal, we'll be able to see this infinite stretch of cakes, cubes, and walls. It kind of hurts my brain a little, but in a good way. But okay, cool, I think we can call this one done.
That was a joke.
Like I mentioned, back in the day, everything was hand painted. Game art, movie posters, you name it. It just made everything feel a lot more authentic. Listen, traditional illustrations are not my specialty, so this is going to be a bit outside my comfort zone. But let's take what we have so far and turn it into a semi-sketch guideline and go for that hand-painted look. I'll start by drawing the cake first and blocking out its basic shapes, and then layering in more colors. We'll do this for the delicious dollops of icing, the cherries, and the candle. I never realized that the cake has this outer wall of nuts.
Why do I always get the nuts?
So we'll have to draw each one and repeat the layering process, as well as add in appropriate shadows and highlights. It's all very monotonous and not the most riveting stuff, so I'll spare you the time it took to get this right. Oh, also, can't forget to light the candle. Many of you subscribed for my other Valve design videos, so I have to check in real quick. How are we feeling about Deadlock and the HLX leaks? It's definitely a bit surreal to be a Valve fan right now. Anyways, let's finish this thing up by painting in the orange portal. I'll be sure to get some of those wispy flyaway particles and give everything a subtle warm glow. And I'll rinse and repeat the painting process again for the background and the graffiti. To get the trippy infinite portal loop, I can just copy the portal, cake, and cube layers, shrink them down a bit, and hit Ctrl J a bunch of times. And with that, I think we've got the desired effect. Last thing I'll do to make everything look a little bit more retro is add this black and orange outline around the artwork and rearrange the text so we can include Valve's logo. So now we know what it'd look like if Valve started making games around 16 years before they formed. Next up, we're retrofying a game that's taken the internet by storm this past year, Lethal Company. We'll be jumping ahead a few years and making this one an SNES cover. So let's start out with adding the game's red logo, which I think contrasts quite nicely with the black box. Then I want the employee to be the main subject. They're the basic player models of the game. First, I'm gonna grab this reference of this guy in a hazmat suit, and I'll draw in the basic shape of his body and start layering in his basic shapes and colors. This may look super rough, but it's going to give me a clearer direction on how to draw these wrinkles in the suit. Real talk, I may have shot myself in the foot here. This is, quite the difficult subject to draw. Nonetheless, we'll persevere. I'm only using a few select orange colors here to draw in things like the separation down the middle of his suit and all those arm creases and brighter highlight areas. Then I can shift focus to the hands and the flashlight. Whew. Alright, I think we're good here. And oh man, I totally forgot his head. That's really no problem at all. I'll repeat the same process by sculpting the head in these cooler blue and gray tones. Now I also want to include the apparatus. In the original reference image, the subject had a briefcase, but I'll swap it out for this cool 3D model from Envato. Let me clean up some of those details, swap out the liquid for a bright glowy light, and draw it in the same way we did the employee. Okay, now that we have a very detailed and nice looking subject, let's draw in our background. I want to create a railing behind him, sort of like he's on a catwalk, which also appear in the game. Just a few gray lines here and there, and that looks pretty convincing. Behind everything, let's keep the same murky vibe that appears on the modern cover art. The color contrasts are starting to really pop, which is great, but to pump it up even more, my trusty smoke brush will help make the atmosphere dense and ominous. You'll notice that the background is still pretty empty, so let's figure out what monster from the game can go right here. Looking at a list of the game's creatures, I found this fellow called the Bracken, and he's definitely the most unsettling. Let's pop him in behind a section of the railing, ready to pounce on our poor employee. Now I'm not going to paint him as detailed, one basic shape with subtle highlights to define his edges will do. Any other detail would get lost because I'm going to blend him into that thick fog. But those piercing white eyes of his definitely need to shine through, and that is definitely looking really creepy. Of course, we can't forget the developer's logo too. I think he'll fit nicely right here. Now we can finally imagine what it'd be like staying up late one Friday in the 90s, screaming our heads off with a couple friends, trying to escape the creature-infested moons of Lethal Company. Alright, let's finish off by finding out if a little underwater sandbox game called Subnautica was made for the PlayStation 1. For this one, I want to change up the art style again and have a mix of 3D and painted elements. Don't mind Subnautica's protagonist Riley here, I want to make him our main subject so he'll be chilling up here as my reference. And since he's wearing his rebreather mask, this is going to call for a lot of photo bashing. So I'll take this 3D model of a diver's mask for the base and duplicate it and change the color for the outer shell. And then we can combine it with this other model of a respirator. 2 for 2 for creating mask wearing guys today, huh? Now we can do some color correction and turn these parts of the filters orange, as well as darken them up and fix all the shades of blue to match the reference. The tubes coming out of the filters are pretty easy, just need to add in lighting and they already look 3D. And I can never really let the little details slide, so let's draw in that lip detailing on that mask using a bevel and emboss effect. These two little parts on the original mask aren't really what I'm going for, which is unfortunate because it means we'll be removing them. It's not the most convenient task, so I'm thinking we just draw back in the shape of the nose piece and paint in shadows, highlights, and noise to give it some dimension. Some sharper highlights will also make it look like this nice vibrant light is bouncing onto the mask. That piece in the center of the respirator is also causing some trouble. It's not oval or metallic like the reference, so I'll jump into the smart object, squeeze everything in, and that also makes quite a bit of yucky details, but all good, I'll just paint over them. Now to add those little shapes and light reflections onto this piece. Add back the lighting, and I think that looks convincing. Will I be drawing a human face today? No, definitely not. However, I do have this idea. What if we make the mask reflect something big, something mean, something menacing right back at us? First, I'll use my previous painting technique to create some open ocean and drop in some of the sand dunes from the game with a simple brushstroke filter on it. And now for our main attraction. Mr. Reaper will be joining us right smack in the center. I really like this photo of him, so let's cut him out and bring him into the scene by adding highlights and painting murky water to give the illusion of distance. Let's also get rid of these extra fish, and then if I duplicate him and add a touch of motion blur, now he's got some movement like he's coming full speed at us. To finish up the reflection, we need some harder edges on the mask to give the illusion of glass or whatever this thing is made up of. And I'll also give more interest to the background with some more sand dunes so this doesn't just look like the void. That way we won't have to worry about double trouble. I also forgot to add these strap things to Riley's mask, so let's hook them on. To bring this whole piece together, if I make a copy of everything, put the zigzag filter on it, and add it back to select areas, we've now got this cool underwater effect. Lastly, let's add back the Subnautica logo as well as the developer's logo. Okay, we all know and love PS1 Hagrid, but now get ready for PS1 Riley. I'm sure he'll be another online sensation. I really do miss unboxing video games and getting to admire the cover art. But nostalgia aside, let me know which one of these you'd want to play. And if you're interested to see what happens when TV's most infamous villains hire me to make their album covers, check out this video here. Thanks everyone, take care.